Long ago, a man lived in a small village in the northeast of Liurnia. This man was a liar. He didn't care about who he hurt. He lied, slandered, and smiled while doing so. One day, the villagers tired of his crimes, so they held him down, took out a knife, and carved out his eyes. He lay there for some time after the villagers left, staring at a sky he could no longer see. He wanted them to pay. He wanted the whole world to burn. A faint light began to grow in his now empty sockets, a yellow flame that grew and grew. He was struck with a maddening pain so much worse than what he felt when his eyes were removed. He let out a crazed howl that echoed all through the mountains. The villagers, startled, went to look in search of the noise. Surely he wasn't still alive. Before they could process what was happening, two hands came forth and clamped their faces, forcing their heads towards two bright yellow pools of light. Heat instantly engulfed them as they met his gaze, then set in the dread as they realized they were burning. A frenzied flame poured out from where the man's eyes once were. They could not look away, they could not escape him. The man, the liar, whose name would haunt the lands between, Shabriri. First, let's take a few steps back and explore these eyes of fire. If you're new here, don't panic, this is completely normal. Today I'm cosplaying one of my favourite artists' OCs called Pidge, created by dovahcaine, and I've done this Three Fingers inspired look. First, let's take a few steps back and explore these eyes of fire. The flame of frenzy causes a yellow flame to burst forth from the caster's eyes. The flame of frenzy deals damage and causes a build-up of madness in both the caster and other tarnished. Madness is the key mechanic that all frenzied flame incantations share. You will experience a momentary loss of control, health, FP, and a brief stagger until you come to your senses. The flavour of this ailment is excellent, as you can mitigate madness by putting more points into your mind stat, which will increase your max FP. I like the idea that you are improving your mental fortitude and focus, suggesting that a strong mind is the best defense against madness. According to the incantation Inescapable Frenzy, madness is contagious. The caster latches onto foes, spreading the madness. To gaze into one another's eyes is truly the most intimate form of human contact. How wonderfully poetic, and although true, these are probably the words of a mad person. The idea of frenzy being a contagious disease raises the question of who the original carrier or patient zero might be. It is said that the sickness of the flame of frenzy began with Shabriri, the most reviled man in all history. Once again, illness-related terminology here. The word sickness is used not only to describe an individual's affliction, but also its potential to spread like an infection. Think of the frenzied flame eyes like the more painful, more yellow version of conjunctivitis or pink eye. Shabriri was allegedly the first to develop the flame of frenzy sickness, and he was not a well-liked individual based on the word reviled. Interestingly, the word is less of a descriptor of the individual and more of a commentary on public perception of said individual. What I mean by this is that the definition of reviled means someone intensely hated by others. It doesn't necessarily speak on the individual's deeds and whether they warrant such abuse, but the result is a severely negative reputation in the eyes of others. So this description actually says a lot more about how others view Shabriri than Shabriri himself. But let's continue on to how this hatred culminated. It is said that the man named Shabriri had his eyes gouged out as punishment for the crime of slander, and with time, the blight of the flame of frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets. Shabriri committed slander, an actual crime where you damage another person's reputation by making untrue verbal statements about them. And it's interesting to consider who the victim of this slander was. Who was the target or targets of Shabriri's falsehoods to warrant the gouging out of his eyes as punishment? Thematically, removing his tongue may have been a more fitting consequence for this crime, but let's be honest, the tongue of Frenzied Flame isn't really as catchy. Interestingly, you find this talisman within the village of Frenzied Flame. Could this have been Shabriri's previous dwelling place, where the fallout of his actions occurred? Did he, with that smug grin, roam the streets weaving tall tales that eventually ignited the villagers' ire? It would explain the corresponding ability of the talisman. If you equip it, you will constantly attract enemy aggro, much like how Shabriri provoked the animosity of others. However, it's worth noting that the talisman isn't actually Shabriri's shrunken head. Instead, it's just his likeness carved into stone. You can also start the game with this item if you choose it as your keepsake. This village is intriguing. It's so heavily affected by frenzy, which might hint this is where the flame first came to be in Shabriri, the epicenter of chaos. But what was the reason why? Why was Shabriri chosen to have this power, him of all people? To find this out, we must explore where the Frenzied Flame originates from. All the Frenzied Flame incantations begin with the same opening statement. Incantation originating from the maddening 3 fingers. Throughout the game, you will hear non-stop about the 2 fingers, entities that serve the greater will, a cosmic, intangible force that we don't see directly in the game, but are exposed to its influence and actions that have shaped the lands between. Many people consider the greater will as an outer god-level being because it has power beyond our comprehension. So if the 2 fingers serve the greater will, then who do the 3 fingers serve? To understand the structure, let me introduce you to another character called Hyetta. Upon entering Liurnia, you might encounter this NPC.
Hello? Is someone there? My name is Hyetta.
Hyetta is blind and asking for your help. She explicitly requests one particular item.
Would you donate any Shabriri grapes in your possession to me? My eyesight has been weak since birth, you see. I can't tell which way I'm supposed to go next.
These are no ordinary grapes, they are Shabriri grapes. Given the ominous associations with Shabriri, it's clear that nothing good follows when you hear his name mentioned. However, according to Hyetta, she feels guidance whenever she consumes one of these magical grapes.
I can feel a distant light in the back of my eyes. It will lead me to my true duty as a finger maiden.
Hyetta aspires to become a finger maiden. Is this something you can just elect to do, or must you be specifically selected and deemed worthy? According to Hyetta's armor, maidens traverse the lands between for different reasons, some to seek audience with the fingers, others to find the tarnished who they were destined to guide. Hyetta believes this is her destiny, and the light she sees when consuming the grapes is tied to this purpose. Well, okay, Hyetta, whatever you say. Here are your grapes. Please enjoy them. And each time you give her a grape, she thanks you kindly, eats it, comments on the distant light, and casually mentions how sweet but searing the flavour of the fruit is. She bids you farewell with the blessing of the fingers upon you. Notice how the term 2 fingers has never been used in Hyetta's dialogue or item descriptions, just fingers, which would imply the existence of another set of fingers. Wouldn't it be curious if the light that Hyetta sees is not the guidance of the 2 fingers, the greater will, or anything like that, but the same light that settled in Shabriri's unseeing eyes? After all, why do you think these are called Shabriri grapes? Like most colloquial terminology, it's likely a naming convention based on what the object reminds you of at first glance. For example, the Nephophia plant. God, she's talking about plants again. This is commonly known as red-hot pokers due to their resemblance to a glowing fireplace poker. The same logic can be applied to Shabriri grapes, although that would imply that they're not grapes, they just happen to look like them because they're not grapes. A yellowing, oozing eyeball of the infirm. The surface is shriveled and the inside is squishy, not unlike a large, overly ripe grape. Biting into the flesh, savouring the taste and texture as the juices burst and scorched her tongue. To make things worse, these aren't just any old eyeballs. Hyetta has been divining something after consuming each one, and that's because they are the eyeballs of the mad. Yellow, orange and red, irises smouldering like fire, having witnessed a frenzied flame. The same flame that settled in Shabriri's eyes, or the space they once occupied. Hence the moniker Shabriri's grapes. Thus, each time Hyetta consumed these grapes, she was unknowingly ingesting madness, feeling the pull of the 3 fingers directing her towards the frenzied flame. So now you have the thrilling task of revealing the truth to Hyetta about the fruit she has been eating.
No. That's not possible. Not all of those people. Their own... So those noises I heard were...
In a horrifying realization, Hyetta pieces together that all those people who came to her previously, patting her blindfold, groaning and pushing their donations into her open hands, were actually plucking out their eyeballs and giving them to her. Why? Because they're crazy. More so, they were likely guided by madness to do such things, but Hyetta also has an idea why, after she's taken some time to process all of this.
I've gleaned something very important indeed, thanks to you. The reason why it was eyes I had to eat, the distant light, is far and frail, so faint it can't be seen by the naked eye. But with everyone's eyes together, it appears.
In this bittersweet way, Hyetta concludes that she helped unify everyone's vision to reveal the hidden light. Through teamwork, each person contributed their eyes, and she was chosen as the vessel to bring them all together, culminating in this collective sight. It's a pure perspective of the events, possibly a coping mechanism. However, it's not impossible that the donors recognized her as a soon-to-be maiden of the Three Fingers, hence why they did what they did. Or, like the recurring theme of this video, they did it because it's chaotic. And once the Frenzied Flame takes a hold of you, chaos is all you know. For Hyetta, her resolve has never been stronger to become a Finger Maiden, but now it's implied that she understands she is to serve the Three Fingers. Her desire for grapes persists when you encounter her again, but now she craves an even more unique grape.
Have you ever heard of fingerprint grapes? They're special grapes which only grow on those who've been clasped by the burnt fingers. I would truly love to try one.
Here is the first time Hyetta explicitly refers to the Three Fingers, calling them burnt fingers, which gives you an idea how they differ from their two-finger relative. Interestingly, she will still refer to eyes as grapes and describe them as growing on people. This is why I believe Hyetta may have entered a delusional state, the madness beginning to affect her as well. And what is particularly ironic is the last line of this dialogue.
Could you donate a fingerprint grape to me? Without one, I don't know. I feel like I might go mad.
Sadly, Hyetta, I feel like the opposite is true and already underway. What Hyetta refers to as fingerprint grapes are actually the eyeballs of someone who has had a close encounter with the Three Fingers, and only one individual in the game meets that description, Vyke. Vyke's story is fantastic. I've already made a dedicated video on him. I mean, the guy is literally on the cover of Elden Ring. He is that guy. If you haven't done so already, I'd recommend watching that video to get a little bit of a biography on him. But in the context of this story, Vyke has special eyeballs. According to his armor, which aptly has the name fingerprint armor, it was singed and blistered by the fingers. He traveled far below the capital and was scorched by the flame of frenzy. When these fingers embraced Vyke, they branded his eye with their giant grooves, leaving him seared with a repulsive fingerprint burn akin to those that marred his entire body. This mark, along with the recognizable shade of yellow and swirling patterns, indicates that Vyke also succumbed to the torment of the Frenzied Flame, his madness and suffering etched into his very body. There are two encounters with Vyke in the game, but the one you need to defeat for Hyetta's quest is the Invader form, Festering Fingerprint Vyke, and upon his defeat, you can claim his eye to bring to Hyetta, and she is ecstatic to receive this.
Oh, a fingerprint grape. Tried and true. What a wondrous thing. A fingerprint grape. Oh, how sweet. Yet, how it burns.
Having eaten this particular grape, Hyetta has a deeper connection to the Three Fingers, presumably having seen their location and where she must travel to next. Deep underground. The next destination for Hyetta's quest is the Frenzied Flame proscription. To reach this place, you need to Give me a second. Navigate through the subterranean shunning grounds, enter the Cathedral of the Forsaken, fight a Moog variant, discover an illusionary wall, and defeat Morgoth. Without completing that last step, a magical seal will block your way. Perhaps you're starting to realise after these multiple red flags that people really don't want you going down into this place. After meeting these prerequisites, you can proceed through a maze of vitamin D deprived prisoners and then face a perilous jumping, or rather falling, puzzle. Also, please don't ask how Hyetta managed to get down here, blind as she is. We can just say that the Three Fingers guided her down here. As you eventually discover, this is where you can actually meet them. Let's talk about the significance of this location and why it is so convoluted for you to access. This area has been inhabited by the Nomads, ancestors of the merchants scattered across the lands between. Their presence here beneath Leendal parallels the fate of Nokron and the Eternal Cities, all banished underground. The Nox people's attempt to create their own lord angered the Greater Will, resulting in their eternal banishment. That explains why this area is also called the Frenzied Flame proscription. Proscription means something condemned, and in this context it applies to the forbidden Frenzied Flame. So what did the Nomads do to warrant banishment? Well, according to the Nomads' ashes, they were entombed in the earth so as to bury the maddening disease that followed them. This suggests that the Greater Will, or another authority, banished the Nomads to quarantine the madness, confining the Frenzied Flame blight in this underground prison to prevent its spread. However, the Nomads' attire tells a different story. These merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. Then they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the Flame of Frenzy. This version implies that the Nomads were accused of heresy and imprisoned, during which time they summoned the Frenzied Flame. The epidemic occurred after the banishment, not before. This distinction changes the narrative significantly, suggesting that the madness was a reaction to their unjust imprisonment, rather than the cause of it. So who is telling the truth? If the Nomads are guilty of heresy, they committed acts like disrespecting the Two Fingers, the Erdtree, the Great Will, or similar entities. Known heretics include the recusants at Volcano Manor. The Nox too could be considered heretics because they attempted to create life from scratch to make a new lord, an apparent contradiction to the principles of the lands between, hence their severe punishment. If the Nomads displayed similar heretical behaviour, a similar sentence makes sense here. However, we have evidence to support otherwise. However, this is in the form of cut content, so please understand that it does affect the validity. If you haven't done already, I implore you to watch Sekiro Dooby's restoration of this cut content. Carle, the first merchant encountered in Limgrave, and the only named one, had an extensive questline that was unfortunately not included in the game's released version. But I'm bringing this up because you discover that Carle is a descendant of the Nomads who were banished underground, and you help him search for their whereabouts. Upon reaching the Frenzied Flame prescription, Carle discovers why his people were condemned, and reacts with understandable indignation.
Did you see what they did to my ancestors? The whole clan buried alive. Sick. Maddened. Husks of themselves. You heard their moans. They're hardly human anymore. They think we worship the Three Fingers, that we called the maddening sickness down upon them. Well, if that's what they expect from us, then that's what they shall get from us!
This monologue, a masterpiece, sadly cut from the game, reveals that the Nomads did not worship the Three Fingers and did not start the Frenzied Flame blight, at least according to Carle. It suggests that they were used as scapegoats, or that those overseeing the lands between simply no longer wanted these peaceful heretics roaming around. This pattern of banishing non-conforming and imperfect beings underground is a recurring theme in the game. The Nox, Nomads, Omens, and the late Godwyn were all hidden underneath the lands between, and nothing bad ever happened because of that. Sadly, it doesn't matter why the Nomads were put underground, because they became mad either way, trapped, despairing, crying out for someone to save them. until they inevitably appeal to a darker being, the Flame of Frenzy. We don't know if they specifically called upon this entity, but the Flame of Frenzy does seem to prey on vulnerable individuals with nothing left to lose. This is what presumably happened to Shabriri after being attacked. His suffering, despair, and desire for chaos manifested precisely into that, the Frenzied Flame. Once again, go watch Sekiro video on Kale to see all the details and how it would have ended. So where does that leave us? Hyetta joins you at the deepest point in the tomb where two ancient closed doors await.
I realized as we've talked, I'll be a maiden, and you, surely a lord. Go to the door ahead. After divesting yourself of your possessions, it will surely open, and the three fingers will welcome you. May the flame of chaos find purchase within you.
Hyetta instructs you to remove all your clothing and belongings to meet the three fingers behind those doors, where you will be bestowed with the Frenzied Flame. Sounds straightforward enough. But in times past, every single person who attempted to control the Flame of Frenzy succumbed to madness after a desperate internal struggle. Remember Vyke? You're walking the same path he did, yet when he met with the three fingers, he ultimately failed to become the next lord and succumbed to madness. But what drove him to pursue this path of Frenzied Flame in the first place? Did he make his choice for his maiden, or did some other force lure him with suggestion? It's the second one. You've been part of a much larger story than initially meets the eye. I introduced this narrative with Shabriri, and spoiler alert, it also ends with Shabriri. You are playing right into his hands. A central plot point, Elden Ring, is the burning of the Erd Tree, the centerpiece of the game's world and where the final battle takes place. But no ordinary fire can burn the Erd Tree, so Melina offers herself as kindling for the flame.
I can set the Erd Tree aflame and guide you down the path to becoming Elden Lord.
She's willing to burn herself to help you create a better world order, a world where the cycle of life and death is restored, with no favoritism, just normal mortality. However, what if there is another way to burn the Erd Tree without sacrificing Melina? Surely that would be a better option. And that is precisely the trap that Vyke fell into. Before you decide to burn the Erd Tree, if you head to the mountaintop of the giants, you will encounter Shabriri. However, you might say, that's not Shabriri, that's my friend Yura, an NPC with an entirely unrelated questline. Regardless of your progress with Yura's quest, he will always spawn here when you arrive at the Zamor ruins. But you quickly realise it's not Yura you're talking to.
Why the long face? I fear that you were previously acquainted with this vessel. Well, that is most unfortunate, for he is dead. As for his flesh, he gave it to me. Shabriri.
Shabriri possesses Yura's body, speaking through him. Now, we'll assess the validity of whether Yura did indeed surrender himself to this being in a moment. What does Shabriri want?
You are about to sacrifice something precious, the life of a fair maiden, that you would toss into the fiery forge, only so that you may be Lord. What a horrible thing to ponder.
He appeals to you, guilt-tripping you, twisting the knife in your gut about how Melina will have to burn herself, questioning if she genuinely wants to do this. How will you live with your decision when you have become Elden Lord and sit on a throne of her ashes? Shabriri is a liar, a slanderer, and a chaotic manipulator. Remember this. Yet, why does his rationale sound so justifiable?
Spare the poor girl, and singe your own flesh in her stead. If you are prepared to show resolve and attain lordship through righteous hardship, then heed the words of I, Shabriri.
To become Elden Lord, you should prove your worth by embracing the flame. Don't shift the burden and toll onto anyone else.
Seek audience with the three fingers and the flame of frenzy. If you inherit the flame of frenzy, your flesh will serve as kindling, and the girl can be spared. setting you on the righteous path of lordship.
This is your legacy. Take up the mantle of chaos.
Burn the Erd Tree to the ground and incinerate all that divides and distinguishes. May chaos take the world. May chaos take the world!
So what does Melina think of this proposal?
If you intend to claim the Frenzied Flame, I ask that you cease. It is not to be meddled with. It is chaos, devouring life and thought unending.
Melina will continuously caution you against inheriting the flame of frenzy. She paints a picture of a barren world, no life, and nothing to be lord of.
The Lord of Frenzied Flame is no lord at all, when the land they preside over is lifeless.
Conversely, Shabriri argues that this is a good thing. Everything should be razed to the ground and cleansed with fire. Let the world burn. Ragnarok, Armageddon. This becomes a personal choice in how you want the story to end.
You have inherited the Frenzied Flame. A pity. You are no longer fit. Our journey together ends here. And remember, should you rise as the Lord of Chaos, I will kill you. As sure as night follows day, such is my duty. For allowing you the strength of runes. Goodbye, my companion.
As you return to Hyetta, who has patiently awaited your return while you commune with the Three Fingers, she implores you to make her your maiden at last.
Could you please rest your hand upon me? Burn me with the flame to make me your maiden. Oh, it burns. My eyes, they're melting.
This is the last step in Hyetta's quest. She is now yours, an official maiden of the Three Fingers, fully enlightened and bestowed with knowledge directly from them.
All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
There is a lot of exposition here, so let's break it down. We are introduced to something called the One Great, a term capitalized indicating its significance. Hyetta implies that everything originated from this entity. Then came life, but the greater will intervened and disrupted the balance. I interpret these words as the greater will meddling and introducing imperfection, sin, and suffering into the world. It's kind of like a Pandora's box metaphor. Life brought pain, therefore everything must be eradicated, the good and the bad. Not just a reset, but a return to nothingness, a state of existence akin to the beginning with just the one great. At least this is how I view it, according to the information Hyetta has gleaned from just your Frenzied Flame touch. Remember, this flame isn't just fire, it has always gone hand in hand with madness. Can you trust the words of anyone who is truly mad? Shabriri wants chaos. It's the last line of his dialogue and what he continuously repeats. He simply laughs if you try to attack him while he possesses Yura's body.
Is chaos incarnate? I cannot die.
These lines suggest that even if everything burns away into nothingness, Shabriri will endure. He's chaos incarnate, not a tangible being, but something transcendent. This explains how he can possess Yura's body. The ability is supernatural. It's puzzling why he chose Yura, who is incredibly headstrong and defiant. However, being so focused on a goal that you stop at nothing to achieve it can often lead to irrational thinking. Perhaps Shabriri is truthful in claiming that Yura perished and he is merely using his body as a puppet, suggesting his power is limited to just possessing deceased bodies. Which leads me to Hyetta, or should I say, Irina. You only meet Hyetta in Liurnia if you have completed Irina's quest. Irina can be found outside of Castle Morn in the south. After a quick back and forth to and from the castle, you discover that Irina has died. Irina shares the same voice actress, hair and clothes as Hyetta, except that her armour is the altered version of the Travelling Maiden set. Hyetta has this small cloak covering her shoulders in the unaltered version. From Software does not reuse NPC appearances for different characters. They may reuse bosses, but narrative characters with quests and stories all have unique designs with intentional features specific to them. Both characters even share the same greeting. Hello, is somebody there? My eyesight's been weak since birth, you see. This begs the question, why does Irina call herself Hyetta when you meet her in Liurnia? The most probable answer to this is Shabriri. We know that he can possess corpses and make them talk in their deceased owner's voice. Although Shabriri's voice is credited to Sean Dooley, who also voices Yura, the same can be said for Claire Corbett, who voices both Irina and Hyetta. We don't know Shabriri's true voice. He might not even have one, having transcended into a concept more than a person at this point. But this has to have been an intentional choice by the game designers. As a side note, there is an excellent interview that Dan Allen Gaming did with Sean Dooley, discussing how he developed the voice style for Yura into Shabriri and a little bit on the Fire Giant as well.
Earthed and connected to the ground. Shabriri is more ethereal.
Right.
If Shabriri is who I think Shabriri, who I recorded.
I recommend checking it out, as Sean seems lovely and has a great voice. Anyway, if Shabriri did indeed possess Irina and assume the identity of Hyetta, it was to entice you into becoming the Lord of Chaos and furthering his goal. Why couldn't Chaos Incarnate do this himself? Perhaps it's because he no longer has a body of his own. He's not tangible enough to defeat all the demigods and complete the game. That would be quite a short story if he could. This could also be a massive, chaotic prank for Shabriri's amusement. Disturbingly, when searching for grapes to feed Hyetta for her quest, you can find Irina's father at the Revenger's shack. He is hostile, driven mad by trying to avenge his daughter's death. When defeated, he drops a Shabriri grape, which you can then feed to his daughter Irina, who you now know as Hyetta. That is just the sort of chaotic thing that an insane Chaos Incarnate being would do. At the end of Hyetta's quest, you can allegedly cause her eyes to melt, and she sadly dies shortly after. It's a downright disrespectful thing for Shabriri to do, watching your touch cause the poor girl's eyes to turn to liquid and run down her face, unable to handle the power of frenzy she has witnessed. He is tragically defiling her corpse. After spinning you a tall tale about the Great One, he relinquishes his hold on her body and floats away to sit back and witness the chaos he has caused. Or is Hyetta a sentient undead? Did Shabriri resurrect her, wipe her memory, and give her the inclination to follow the light, guiding you towards the Three Fingers and inheriting the Flame of Frenzy? Or is Shabriri in it for the long haul, committed to possessing Hyetta for her entire quest chain? It seems strange that compared to when you approach him in the mountaintop of the giants, he simply says, "Yep, I'm Shabriri and I'm possessing your friend. What about it?" But then again, he does want chaos, and chaos is unpredictable. The way I interpret him is that he started as a troublemaker, running his mouth for fun, who then got a punishment that did not really fit the crime. He fell into despair, possibly nihilism. This entity, the Three Fingers, heard his pleas for chaos and bestowed him with their power, the Frenzied Flame. He could infect people, run around and spread chaos effectively with this madness. At some point, he transcended into an outer being, able to possess people, until one worthy would arrive to become the Lord of Chaos and create the world, or lack thereof, that he longed for. There is a lot of room for interpretation with chaos and frenzy. But this ending is an incredible depiction of these concepts. Melina, discussing the outcome of the Frenzied Flame, shows a charming naivety.
However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that, is there not? If you would become Lord, do not deny this notion. Please, leave the Frenzied Flame alone.
Melina doesn't want destruction where new lives are denied from the world. She believes that life is good despite the state of the world, and certainly better than no life at all. There is an interesting timing interaction in this game. If you let Melina burn herself to set alight the Erd Tree and then pursue the Frenzied Flame ending, she will not appear in the final cutscene. Conversely, if you burn the Erd Tree yourself, Melina leaves you, betrayed, and swears to hunt you down and end your life for what you have done. This confirms that Melina survives the ending, as do you, with Shabriri laughing somewhere in the ether. What do you think of Chaos in Elden Ring? Did you choose this ending? And what did you think of it? Like I said at the beginning of this video, I am cosplaying Pidge, who is dovahcaine's tarnished OC. They did an incredible job on today's thumbnail. I really wanted to show off the insanity of some of these Frenzied Flame related NPCs, and they absolutely nailed my request. So please go follow them on Twitter at dovahcaine. I love that art so much. Thank you everyone for watching this video. Thank you so much for being patient while I prepare lore plays, as they do take a bit of extra time to put together. I just really wanted to say thank you all for being so supportive with my style of videos and the way I portray myself online. And I'm really thankful that a lot of you enjoyed this aspect and how much it adds to the lore. So thank you everyone so much, and a special thank you to my channel members and patrons.